And we are going to start the webinar. It's just 3 o'clock, and I am Julie Henriques. I'm the Executive Director of Sisters in Crime, and I'm just delighted to be here and to be sort of running the behind the scenes a little bit for the wonderful Patricia Sargent. I'll tell you more about Patricia in a second. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit more about Sisters in Crime. Some of you may not know a lot about this wonderful organization. It's the only organization of its kind, an international society of writers, readers, agents, editors, publicists, librarians, and bookstore owners, and other people who support our unique mission, which is to promote the ongoing advancement, recognition, and professional development of women crime writers. Since our founding 35 years ago, our mission and our support has expanded to include other marginalized crime writers as well. To learn more about Sisters in Crime and the many ways we support our members across the globe and at the chapter level, please visit www.sistersincrime.org. This session will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be posted on the Sisters in Crime website in the next few days. It's available in the webinar archives, which is a benefit for members. And so this will be one of dozens of webinars that you can look at as a member of Sisters in Crime to re-inspire yourself. So there's a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you'd like to use closed captioning, click on the button at the bottom of your screen and you can look at the closed captioning. If you want to shut it off, that's how you do it as well. But the closed captioning has been enabled. The chat is open so that you can have, of course, I'm pointing like you all can see me. My chat is over there. My chat is open so that you can have conversations with each other. But if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer section, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Unless you're on an iPad, then it might be different. But it's wherever all the little icons are, and we will get to them. So Patricia's talk has several stopping points. She'll ask if there are questions. If there are, I will read them out to her and we will get them answered. There will also be time for questions and answers at the end of the session. Now, for a little bit more about Patricia. Patricia Sargent is a national best-selling, award-winning author. She writes romance as Patricia Sargent and Regina Hart, and mysteries as Olivia Matthews. Her work has been reviewed in national publications such as Publishers Weekly, USA Today, Kirkus Review, Suspense Magazine, Mystery Scene Magazine, Library Journal, and RT Book Reviews. Patricia was drawn to write romance because she believes love is the greatest motivation. Her mysteries put ordinary people in extraordinary situations to have them find the hero inside. For more information about Patricia and her work, please visit patriciasargent.com. Patricia, welcome to the webinar series, and thank you so much for doing this session. Patricia and I did a podcast interview, and she mentioned that she did this, she taught Fun with Plotting, and I said, I know I would like to learn more about that. So I'm so grateful that you're here and you're doing this.
Julie, I am so grateful that you're here and partnering with me on this presentation. I really appreciate everything that you do, not just for me, but for the organization.
Oh, it's my complete honor. So I'm going to hide, but I'm here, and you got the floor.
Thanks so much. Thank you again, everyone, for attending my Fun with Plotting presentation. I'm going to look over here at the script that I've printed out, because there's so much that I want to share with you in this presentation, and I don't want to forget anything or leave anything out. So forgive me for not giving you direct eye contact as I look over here at my script. Now, I'm going to try to do the screen share. Julie was helping me with this earlier. I think I've got it now. And let me do the slideshow. Okay. As Julie explained, I write romance and I write mysteries. And I'm bringing that up. I'm repeating that because I want to show that the Fun with Plotting presentation provides plotting tools that work with multiple fiction genres. These tools are not just for romance writers and they're not just for mystery writers. I truly believe that these writing tools will work with all forms of popular fiction. Now, the title of the presentation, Fun with Plotting, is a little tongue-in-cheek. I love plotting my stories, and I love talking about plotting my stories. Just ask my husband. And I love talking about plotting other writers' stories. But I do recognize that there are people who aren't comfortable with plotting. Similarly, there are people who are not comfortable with pantsing either. They're somewhere between the pantsing and the plotting. Whatever your preference, or if you're somewhere in between, I want to offer you these 7 plotting elements that have helped me as I lean on them to develop the plots in my stories. Now, when I go through these different plotting tools, I use Beauty and the Beast to help illustrate these plotting elements. So I hope that you have seen Disney's, I think it's the 1992 version of Beauty and the Beast, so that you could picture it along with me, or at least if you're familiar with the structure. But whether you're familiar with it or not, I am very well equipped to go into mind-numbing details of the different scenes to help illustrate it. But I just wanted to explain why I was going to be using Beauty and the Beast during this presentation. Now, first, before we move forward, I want to share with you a disclaimer. It's important to remember that there is not just one way to write, and there is not a right way to write. When we're drafting our manuscripts, we can't get hung up on, oh, how am I supposed to do this? Am I doing it right? There is not just one way to write, and no one can tell you that you're doing it wrong. And here's why. I believe you can walk into a room in which there are 3 multi-published New York Times, USA Today best-selling authors. And if you were to ask each of those 3 authors, how do you write? How do you tell your stories? I firmly believe that you will walk out of that room with at least 7 different answers. Every storyteller is unique. And similarly, every story is unique. It's important to remember that, at least while we're writing our drafts. For example, you might think back on one of your manuscripts and think, oh, well, when I wrote that story, I wrote it sequentially, with each scene building up to another scene and another scene and another scene until I got to the end of the book. But then you'll think about another story that you wrote, and you'll think, okay, well, I wrote that one out of order. I wrote the scenes as they were coming to me, and they didn't come to me in order. And then you might think of yet another manuscript that you wrote in which you wrote the ending before you wrote the beginning, because that's just the way that the story came to you. Steven Spielberg has said that when he was writing Raiders of the Lost Ark, the beginning wasn't what came to him. What came to him was for the middle, where they had the caravan scene and Indiana Jones was fighting to get Marion back. And first he was outside of the caravan of trucks. Do you remember that scene? Did you see that movie? First he was outside, and then he was inside, and he was fighting on top of it, and then he was fighting below it. That was a scene that came to him. So Steven Spielberg then had to figure out what came before that scene to get Indy in that caravan. And then what happened after that scene, after Indy got out of the caravan. So the stories come to you as they come to you, and they don't necessarily always come the same way. I give you those examples again. There isn't just one way to write, and there is not a right way to write, at least not with your draft. Every storyteller is unique. Every story is unique. So it's important to give yourself the flexibility to tell your story. Don't confine yourself. Remain open to the way that the story is coming to you. Don't constrain yourself, because part of storytelling is discovery. So now that we're level set, I want to introduce you to the 7 plotting elements I've used to help plot my stories. You'll probably recognize most, if not all, of these elements. Okay, the 7 plotting elements: log lines, character diamonds, goal motivation, conflict, stakes, turning points, plots, 25 things that have to happen. These are the 7 plotting elements I've leaned on over the years to help get into my story world. I don't always drill down into all 7 of them, though. I may only dig into 5 or 6 and then just gloss over the other 1 or 2. But I usually dive down into all 7. You may find that you don't necessarily want to dive into all 7 of them all of the time either, but that's completely up to you. I'm going to present them all to you and explain how I interpret them, how I use them. And then if you would like to give them a try, I hope that you find them helpful too. So let's get started. We'll start with the log line. A log line is a brief description of your story, usually 1, but no more than 2 sentences. It's a tight summary of your manuscript. The log line is similar to the program descriptions you'll see on your cable guide or your streaming service guide that sums up the movie or the episode of the series that you're going to watch. It's also been called a story premise or an elevator pitch. Developing your log line is an exercise in getting a firm grasp of what your story is about, wrapping your arms around the core of your story. You can refer to your log line if you get stuck as you're writing your story, for example. It's your roadmap. Consider it your touchstone. By understanding the basic elements of your story, you can ask yourself, okay, based on my log line, how is this scene that I'm writing advancing my story? Does it advance my story? Does it even belong in my story? Some people think, oh, Patricia, how am I supposed to explain my 50,000, 60,000, 80,000, 100,000 word story in just 1 or 2 sentences? I've got a lot going on here. How am I supposed to boil it down to just 1 or even 2 sentences? My friends, you need to figure out what is the core of your story, at the heart. What is the core of your story? Providing a log line is important when you're trying to sell your story to a potential literary agent or a potential editor or a potential reader, someone who wants to give you cold, hard cash for your books. That person is not going to want to stand there for 2, 3, 5 minutes while you try to summarize your story for them. That person is going to want a 15-second description that provides them with just the core of your story. They don't want to hear, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. You're going to lose them. Their eyes will glaze over and roll back into their head. If a literary agent asks you about your story and you respond with, I can't explain it in 1 or 2 sentences, you've lost them right there. If you don't understand your story well enough to boil it down to an elevator pitch, how are they going to sell your story to a publisher? How are they going to get excited about your story? You need to understand your story well enough to summarize it if you want to get that representation with a literary agent or that contract with a publisher or that sale with a reader. Often while I'm at book events, a reader will come up to me and ask me what my story is about. If you have your log line, you can answer that question right on the spot. Give them that elevator pitch, that log line. And once you've got their interest, you can then hand them a promotional postcard or bookmark for additional details that they can read on their own. Or you can give them a copy of your book so they can read the back cover copy, and hopefully they'll take that book to the cash register. Cha-ching. But if you struggle to summarize your story for them, they're going to get bored. So let's talk about the elements of your logline. Got your protagonist, your antagonist, and your conflict. These are the three elements of a functioning logline. Your protagonist or your hero, your antagonist or your villain, and your conflict. And here are some examples of loglines. First one, an orphaned boy, your protagonist, enrolls in a school of wizardry where he learns the truth about himself, his family, and the terrible evil, antagonist, that haunts the magical world, conflict. And you may or may not recognize Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I had to move something out of the way, it was blocking my screen. Now, notice that I did not use proper nouns. I didn't say Harry Potter goes to Hogwarts where he learns the truth about himself, his family, and Voldemort. I used nouns and adjectives to give the listener a better understanding of the characterization or elements of the story. Let's try another logline. Sorry. A 19th century criminal psychologist, protagonist, tries to identify a baffling new kind of criminal, conflict, a serial killer, antagonist. Now here, we still have our three elements, protagonist, antagonist, and conflict. But the order of those elements is shifted around to maximize the impact of the logline. We still have those three elements. They're just arranged differently to get the maximum appeal out of it. For a third logline, an arrogant young prince, protagonist, and his castle's servants fall under the spell of a wicked enchantress, antagonist, who turns him into a hideous beast until he learns to love and is worthy of love in return, conflict. La Belle et la Bête by Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve, Beauty and the Beast. Now this logline is particularly intriguing to me because Beauty and the Beast is actually a complex story. Now, I think I might hear some laughter there, but I'm serious. Despite the complexity, we're still able to create a one-sentence logline by focusing just on the core, the heart of the story. So let's review the story twists, and you could see what I'm saying a little bit about the complexity. In the popular version of Beauty and the Beast, which I refer to as Disney's version, the enchantress is barely in the story. She's very briefly mentioned in the backstory summary that Disney puts at the beginning of Beauty and the Beast. In that version, we focus more on Beast as the antagonist. He's the one who imprisons Belle's father, Maurice. He's the one who agrees to release Maurice, provided Belle takes Maurice's place. That is classic villainy stuff. But then as the story progresses, Beauty and Beast, Belle and Beast become friends. Then they fall in love, and now you have two protagonists. Now, unless you want to slap a happily ever after, right at that part of the movie, we're going to need another villain. Enter Garçon, who inflames the other townspeople into a mob on a misguided mission to kill Beast. So throughout the story, the role of the antagonist shifts. And that's what I mean by the complexity. The enchantress is the villain at the story's origin. Beast becomes the villain at the story's inciting incident. And then Garçon enters as the villain at the story's ordeal. So based on these twists and turns, your story premise could read very differently. But by focusing on the story's core message, what are you trying to say with this story? The transformative power of love. You can create a much more compelling, succinct, one-sentence logline. Now, our final example, logline example, is from one of my stories. In this modern take on the classic Beauty and the Beast story, yes, I have a fixation, a reclusive resort owner's protagonist's self-imposed isolation is threatened, conflict, by a mysterious guest, antagonist, on a self-imposed exile. So that's Harmony Cabins, which I wrote as Regina Hart. I put this example here because, again, we have our hero and heroine as, we have our hero as our protagonist and our heroine starts as our antagonist. That happens often in genre fiction where where you have two protagonists on opposing sides when the story starts, but then they have a meeting of the minds and they become allies who face a different conflict as the story progresses. So just because technically speaking, you have two protagonists, don't let that inhibit you from pointing out that they start on different sides of an issue. A lot of people, they get hung up on identifying who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist. At the beginning of the story, you could have them clashing, conflicting against each other, even though by the end of the story, they come together to fight a common evil. So those are examples of log lines. Do we have any questions at this point?
Patricia, we have one question. Do pantsers write their log lines after their first drafts?
Again, storytellers are very unique. Some people write the story and then figure out what their log line is. Some people, like me, need the log line at the beginning to serve as a roadmap. But you've got to tell the story the way the story comes to you. And if the log line doesn't come to you until you have put the story on the draft, then use that log line for your revision. Does that help?
Yes, yes. And there's some conversations in the chat about this as well, but that's it. So that's the only log line question.
Super, super. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to character diamond, which I find a lot of fun, and I hope that you do too. So, character diamonds. These help you understand the characters who are driving your story. Your character is your story. And I'm really super passionate about this, so please indulge me. Your character is your story. And what I mean by that is your character invites your reader into your story. You're not the one sending out the invitation. Your character is. It's through your character's eyes that your readers see your story, experiences your story. It's while your reader is in your character's skin that they are experiencing your story. It's through your character's emotions that they are reacting to your story. It's by having a firm understanding of your character's goal, motivation, and conflict that your readers understand your character's actions and reactions within the story. Therefore, it's very important for you to know your character, for you to understand your character so you can build empathy and keep your reader in your story. The better you understand your character, the stronger your plot will be, and you'll find it easier to plot your scenes and sequels, your character's actions and reactions. The better you understand your character. To develop your story, you must understand the characters who are instigating it, those characters who are driving it forward, as well as those who are obstructing it. How would they react to the obstacles you're putting in their way? Their reactions drive your story's plot. Their reactions determine the direction in which your story moves. Their reactions are your turning points. So that's why the character diamond is a starting point for me. And it could be for you as well when you're outlining your plot. It's your starting point to understanding your characters and their goal, motivation, and conflict. The character diamonds apply not just to your protagonists, but to your villain if your villain is human. Now, if your villain is something else like nature, technology, or time, then the character diamond is not going to work for you. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to just focus on human protagonists and human antagonists. And here are the elements of the character diamond. There are 4 traits: your primary trait, your secondary trait, your shadow trait, and your fatal flaw, which is a biggie, but we'll come to that. The primary trait is your character's strongest personality trait. This is your character's dominant personality. It's the personality your character presents to the world, or that the world interprets from your character. Your character may have other aspirations and dreams, but what is the personality your character is presenting to the world? Is your character an extrovert or an introvert? A nurturer or the nurtured? A leader or a follower? And we have the secondary trait, the trait the character most wishes they had. This is the trait that your character aspires to. This is who your character wishes to be. So for example, an introvert may wish to be an extrovert. A loner may wish to be a nurturer. An impulsive person may wish to be more restrained. So this is their aspirational trait, what they aspire to. The shadow trait supports the character's primary trait. It emphasizes, it boosts the characterization, the trait that the world sees most prominently in your character. So for example, your character who is an extrovert may be an extrovert because they're outgoing. Or your character who is impulsive may be perceived as impulsive because their shadow trait is impatient. So that impatience is boosting the perception of their being impulsive. A character who's a thinker may be perceived that way because their shadow trait is they plan before they act. And now the fatal flaw. This is a trait that prevents the character from developing their secondary or aspirational trait. As an example of a secondary trait, perhaps their fatal flaw is that they're rash, which prevents them from being a planner, which is their secondary or aspirational trait. So their fatal flaw blocks their aspirations. They need to work on that fatal flaw if they're to achieve their aspirational secondary trait. Let's take a look at Belle's character diamond. When we first meet Belle, who is she? She's a caregiver who wants to be an adventurer. So her primary trait is that of caregiver. She takes care of her father, Maurice. He's a mess. If you've seen the movie or have heard of it, Maurice is a mess. And if it were not for Belle, he'd be in a really terrible spot. So her primary trait, what the world sees of her, how the world perceives her, is that of a caregiver. Her secondary trait, or her aspirational trait, is that of an adventurer. Disney wrote a whole song about it in which Belle sings about her being tired of her provincial life, and she wants to go places and see things and experience things, and she wants to travel the world. That is her aspiration, to be an adventurer, to try new things, to live new experiences. Wrote a whole song about it. The song is great. Her shadow trait is dutiful. She's a dutiful daughter. This is the trait that supports her primary trait as caregiver. She can't kick Maurice to the curb because she is a dutiful daughter. That is her shadow trait. Her fatal flaw is that she's a nurturer. She is compelled to take care of the people she loves. It's in her fiber, the very fiber of her being is a nurturer. And that blocks her from her aspirational secondary trait of being an adventurer. How can she travel the world when the people she loves and cares for are in that small provincial town? So to recap Belle's character diamond, we have her primary trait as caregiver, her secondary aspirational trait as adventurer. Her shadow trait is dutiful, and that is what supports her primary trait. And her fatal flaw is that of a nurturer, which is what is opposing or blocking her aspirational trait. Let's take a look at Beast. When we first meet Beast, who is he? He's a loner. The prince has been turned into this horrid, scary beast. So he has isolated himself from the town, holed up in his castle. And there are signs that he doesn't interact much with his household staff. So he has secluded himself, even within his castle. He's a complete loner, like sulking all by himself in a few rooms in his castle, away from the world, away from every other person. That's his primary trait. His secondary trait is empathetic, or at least it should be empathetic. He needs to learn to put other people, their needs before him. Remember, if he's to break the curse, he has to fall in love, learn to love, and prove himself worthy of the object of his affections love, if he's to break the curse. So his aspirational trait should be empathetic. Now, what is his shadow trait? The trait that is supporting his primary trait, self-absorption. Woe is me, look at what fate has done to me, look at this horrible situation that I'm in, look what the enchantress has done to me, sulk, sulk, sulk. And listen, let's speak the truth. I would be sulking too. But that's his shadow trait. His self-absorption, his self-pity is supporting his primary trait of being a loner. His fatal flaw is arrogance. It's all about him 24/7, 365. And that arrogance is what is blocking his aspirational secondary trait of empathy. Since he's so all about him, woe is him, pity him, he can't think about what other people are going through. You know, there's a whole castle of people who have been enchanted and turned into brooms and mops and closets and teacups and candlesticks. But he's all about him. He's all about what has happened to him. He's not thinking about the other people in his castle. So to recap Beast's character Diamond, we have his primary trait as loner, his secondary aspirational trait as empathy or empathetic, his shadow trait is self-absorption, which supports his primary trait. And his fatal flaw is arrogance, and that's what's blocking his aspirational trait of empathy. So we've reviewed the character diamonds. Do we have any questions about the character diamonds at this point?
We do have a few questions, so I'm going to skip around a little bit and ask them as we're going. But one of the questions is, people are having trouble understanding the difference between primary traits and fatal flaws. For instance, with Belle, what's the difference between nurturer and caretaker? Can you just go, I think that it becomes clear with the examples, but can you just go through those 4 things again?
Absolutely, it would be my pleasure. Thank you. And there is a similarity, I have to admit, between some of these. But if you think about it, her role is a caregiver to her father. She takes care of him. And there is a very fine line. I understand the confusion. There is a very fine line between caregiver and nurturer. In a way, I suppose you could switch them around, but it's like being a nurse, a caregiver, a nurse to her father, a personal assistant to her father. And then that same caring, nurturing is what is blocking her from being an adventurer, is because it's in her blood to be a nurturer to the people she loves, not just Maurice, her father, but to the people she loves, which is why at the end of the story, she rushes out to rescue. At the beginning of the story, she rushes out to rescue her father. That's because it's in her blood to take care of people. Just as at the end of the story, she rushes out to rescue Beast. It's a reckless kind of caring where she puts herself in danger because she is a nurturer. She cares for people. So that I can understand the confusion. And it's just, think of it as being an expanded version of that primary trait. And that has to conflict with the aspirational trait.
Yes, so that the primary trait is their strongest personality trait. The shadow trait supports that primary trait. The secondary trait is the trait they most wish they had. And their fatal flaw is what's getting them in their way of getting that secondary trait. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is a strong similarity between who they are and what is blocking them from being who they want to be.
Right. All right, let's get some more of these questions. What about characters' wounds? The things that their traumas. So how do these fit into their character diamonds?
Actually, those go deeper than a character diamond. The character wounds, I believe, are more accurately addressed in character sketches. This character diamond is a thumbnail that can help you develop your goal, motivation, and conflict. But when we get to secrets and wounds and family dynamics, those are more for character sketches. So when I was addressing the character diamonds, it's a start. But you do need to go deeper when you flesh out your actual scenes. And I would highly recommend doing a detailed character sketch when you're fleshing out your scenes.
Great. So can you explain empathy a bit more?
Sure. Empathy is when you are in a situation, you're in one situation and you're seeing someone who is hurting and you want to connect with that person to let them know that you understand their pain and confusion, even if you cannot help them. You understand that they're going through pain and confusion. So you make that human connection, that touch, a connection, a touch. Just give them a little part of yourself to help ease their pain. Beast is unable to do that because it's all about him. And it's not until he starts to get to know Belle that some of her nurturing, caring, he takes on some of that, and that's what helps him develop his empathy, because she rubs off on him.
Great. If the character goes through an arc of change in the book or series, will their traits change over time?
Typically, yes. Because, for example, you have the Wizard of Oz. At the beginning of the Wizard of Oz, the lion has no courage. And he's scared and weepy and jumping at every sound and shadow. But with Dorothy's help and the Tin Man's help and the Scarecrow's help, you see during the Wizard of Oz, the lion start to get his courage, so that by the end of the story, he stands up for his friends. He's not going to let his friends face that witch alone. He's going to stand up for them. He's going to fight with them. Yes. So they take on different traits as their character arc goes. It's sort of like the Matrix. At the beginning of the Matrix, Neo wants to believe, but he's not sure that he believes. So yeah, he learns to fight, and he learns to go from the real world with the blue pill to the red pill, and he jumps off the roof the first time and falls on his face and busts his mouth. By the end of the movie, he's flying everywhere. So yeah, they take on new traits as the character arc grows, and that is so very important. It's so very important that your characters grow like that.
Great. Let's do one more and then you can move on, because I know you have 5 more things to talk about. As to the character diamond, is someone self-absorbed and arrogant going to be able to recognize the need to be empathetic? So in other words, are these character diamonds, I think this is what I'm saying in other words, is this something that the characters know, or as a writer you understand the character diamond? Does the character understand their diamond?
Beautiful question. And no, typically not. The character doesn't realize that they're lacking anything until they see it. Beast is perfectly happy. Well, not perfectly happy. Beast doesn't think there's anything wrong with him. He thinks something has been done to him. He doesn't think he's done anything. Something has been done to him. And then he meets Belle and he sees Belle and he's like, maybe. And he gets to know her, and some of her rubs off on him.
Great.
Hallmark does that in a lot of their movies too.
Yes, they do. All right, we've got a couple more, but why don't we keep going, and then at the end we'll answer some more questions, okay?
That sounds super. Thank you so much for your help, Julie. Let me find my way. And don't peek, you guys, because I want this. Okay, Hope you didn't peek. Here we are. Okay, the next plotting tool, goal, motivation, and conflict. And again, your character is your story. I don't think this can be overstated. So it's very important to understand what your character wants, their goal, what's motivating your character, and what's preventing your character from achieving their goal, the conflict. Because, let's say it all as a group, your character is your story. Say it and believe it. So the importance of character growth on your story journey also cannot be overstated. Your character's development is an important part of keeping your readers engaged. This goes back to one of the questions that was asked. That development speaks to a compelling story journey. Readers should see the effect of the story journey on your protagonist, sort of like in The Matrix. So as many of you know, goal, motivation, and conflict speaks to your character's internal goal, motivation, and conflict, as well as their external goal, motivation, and conflict. The internal goal, motivation, and conflict drives the character. The external goal, motivation, and conflict drives the action. So that's just a quick way of remembering the difference between internal and external GMC. So if you watch Beauty and the Beast, or if you're familiar with Disney's version of that fairy tale, you'll remember the characters' goals, motivations, and conflicts. So Belle's internal goal, motivation, and conflict. Her internal, she wants to travel the world. Why? Motivation, she wants adventure. Conflict, what's keeping her from her goal of traveling the world? Caring for Maurice. Her external goal, motivation, and conflict. What's her goal? She wants to rescue Maurice, her father. What's her motivation? She wants him to be safe. What's the conflict? Beast. Beast has imprisoned her father. So what's Beast's internal goal, motivation, and conflict? He wants to end the curse. Why? Of course, duh, he wants to be normal. What is his conflict? Himself. He is his conflict. What's his external goal, motivation, and conflict? He wants to win Belle's love. That's his goal. The motivation, he wants to break the curse. What's his conflict? Again, it's him. He's a grump. Then we have Garcon. What is Garcon's internal goal, motivation, and conflict? His goal is to have power and influence. His motivation is he wants admiration. The conflict is he's never satisfied. Disney wrote a whole song about it. Every woman in town wants Garcon. Every man in town wants to be Garcon. Despite that, he's not satisfied. He wants more and more admiration. He wants the best of everything. He is never going to be satisfied no matter what you do for him or what you give him. What is his external goal, motivation, and conflict? His goal is to marry Belle. The motivation, again, he wants to be envied. What's his conflict? Belle. She is never going to marry Maurice. So the internal conflict, your character should not be the same at the end of the story as they were at the beginning of the story. That's why it's important to understand your character's internal goal, motivation, and conflict. Just as for your happy ending, your character should achieve their external goal, which is for Belle saving her father, for Beast winning Belle's love. Your characters also need to achieve their internal goal, which in the case of Beast was breaking the curse, and in the case of Belle, having an adventure. Here, oops, sorry. Here's a tip. Sorry, I jumped the gun with that slide. A tip, a storytelling tip. State your protagonists and antagonists' internal and external goals, motivations, and conflicts plainly and immediately, so your readers can understand the story journey from the start. Don't make them guess. Spell it out for them. So that's goal, motivation, and conflict. Do we have any questions for that?
The only question is, I'm sort of looking at chat, but if you do have a question, folks, put it in the question and answers. Goal, motivation, and conflict. So internal is drives the character, external drives the action. And in a series, or even in the course of a book, this might change, correct?
Yes. Oh, very good question. Yes. In the course of even that story, the goal, motivation, and conflict can change. It can morph once you've gotten to certain levels. So for example, in Star Wars, A New Hope, Luke wants to join the revolution. And at first he's not able to do that, but then he's able to do that. And as we go on, oh, okay, wait a second. When he starts out, he wants to save the princess. He wants to save the princess. He gets that opportunity, but then he stays to join the revolution. So even in that one movie, Luke goes from one goal, motivation, and conflict to another.
Great. So somebody has their hand raised, but if you can type in your question, or I can chat with you, then we can, I can get it. But for right now, we're done with questions, so you can move on.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're on to the next plotting tool, which is stakes. Knowing what's at stake for your character helps your reader understand what keeps them going despite the obstacles and the odds. For example, let's take a romance with a marriage of convenience theme. If you have a protagonist who wants and needs to adopt their orphan niece, for example, let's just keep it simple, readers would believe that your protagonist would be willing to marry a stranger to have the adoption approved because their niece's well-being is at stake. That's a big stake. That's a big one. But if your protagonist is pretending to get married just to get a promotion, in this day and age, that may just not be enough of a stake. The stake needs to be compelling so that your readers can buy into why your characters would do what you have them get involved in what you have them doing. So let's look at, sorry, I jumped the slide again. Let's look at mysteries. We have an amateur sleuth who has no idea what they're doing, no idea about solving crimes. What keeps your amateur sleuth going despite the obstacles that you're putting in their path? What is at stake? Curiosity is just not big enough. I mean, how many of us have seen those mysteries or read those mysteries where the sleuth is just a nosy Nelly? And how many of us have rolled our eyes at that? But if you were to say, this amateur sleuth doesn't know anything about solving murders, doesn't know anything about defending themselves, but she has to solve this crime to stay out of jail, or because someone's trying to kill them or their parents or their loved one, then those are stakes your readers can buy into. They can connect with them. They'll understand why your protagonist keeps going despite the many obstacles you're putting in their path. And as the story progresses, of course, the stakes have to increase. Those stakes have to get continually more intense. If there aren't consequences to our protagonist's actions or inactions, then what is driving your story? The stakes have got to continually increase. Now, typically in a single title novel, there are usually three stakes that coincide with the three parts of a story, beginning, middle, and end. So what's at stake in Beauty and the Beast? These three stakes speak to Belle's nurturer trait, that fatal flaw. The story journey, I noticed, actually runs through all of her character diamonds. So the first stake is Maurice's safety, and that speaks to Belle's caregiver trait. She can't, or more likely she won't, leave her father. Then we have the second stake, which is Maurice's health. And she rushes to his side. In the third stake, we have Beast's life. Again, as a nurturer, as a caregiver, as someone she loves is in trouble, she's going to rush into that danger whenever they need her. She's going to do whatever she can to save the people she loves. So those are the stakes, and they get increasingly intense. First, safety's bad enough, but then his life, his health is in danger. And then Beast's life is in danger. So the stakes are increasing as the story goes. Those are examples of stakes. Do we have any questions?
If stakes or motivation, is this the same as the motivation of goal, motivation and conflict, or is this a different kind of motivation?
Excellent question. It's a different kind of motivation. So the internal and external goal, motivation, and conflict speaks directly to the protagonist or the antagonist. But these stakes are story stakes.
Okay. I think that was the only question so far on stakes. Again, we will have some questions at the end. So we will answer more. So we're ready to move forward.
Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate that. So we're on to our next element, which is turning points. Stakes and turning points work together like peanut butter and chocolate in a Reese's peanut butter cup. Turning points are triggered by a stake that takes the readers to another part of your story. So as each stake escalates, the plot shifts, driving your readers ever deeper into your story. This shows the close connection between stakes and turning points. So as I mentioned with stakes, every story has three parts. It doesn't matter how short the story is. It has three parts, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there are usually three turning points. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Each story turning point is triggered by a stake, as I mentioned, that is resolved and then shifts the story into another world or another environment, whether it's something tangible, like your character moving out of their parents' home and into their own apartment, or a city person moving to the country, or whether it's something intangible, like a change of attitude or a change of fortune. For example, in Wizard of Oz, when a wealthy and evil neighbor takes Toto, remember the dog, with the intent of having Dorothy's dog killed, Dorothy rescues Toto and they run away from home. So what's at stake? Toto's life. How is that conflict resolved? Dorothy and Toto go on the lam. This resolution leads them to the first turning point, which brings readers to Oz. So let's take a look at Beauty and the Beast's turning point. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I got my slides a little bit out. Okay. The beginning. In the beginning of the story, we meet the main players, Belle, Beast, Maurice, and Garçon. And then there's Garçon's friend, whose name I can never remember. We see the quiet little ordinary town in which Belle and Maurice live, and we meet their pleasant neighbors, the bakery person, the librarian, and we learn each main character's internal and external goal, motivation, and conflict through song. What's at stake at the beginning of the story? As we discussed, Maurice's safety. How is it resolved? Belle takes Maurice's place in the cell. This resolution leads to the first turning point, which brings Belle into the castle. So she has physically changed location. At the middle of the story, Belle and Beast are growing closer. You see Beast changing, becoming more empathetic, which addresses that one of the very good questions that we had. The castle is magical, which is a new experience for Belle. And then she learns, Maurice is sick. What's at stake? Maurice's health. How is it resolved? Beast releases Belle from her commitment and she returns to the town. However, and there's always a however, you have a turning point, however, resolution leads to the second turning point, which returns Belle to the town, but the environment has changed. The town has gone from an ordinary place with pleasant people to a dark place with very angry, crazy people. Part 3 is the end of the story. Belle has returned to town, as we discussed. She finds her father and rescues him from Garçon's threat to have him committed to a mental institution. However, there's always a however. By proving her father is not cray-cray, she turns her neighbors against Beast. So what's at stake? Beast's life. How is it resolved? Belle returns to the castle to save Beast. This resolution leads to the third and final turning point, which lifts the curse. Beast and his household staff are returned to human beings. So that addresses turning points. Do we have any questions about turning points?
Yes, we have one. Can flashbacks be seen as turning points?
See, I'm tempted to say no. The reason I'm tempted to say no is that turning points speak to current action. So a flashback makes me think of a prologue. So if it's a flashback and I'm seeing it as a prologue, I'm thinking that flashback is more of an inciting incident which starts the story than a turning point which shifts the story. Because turning points shift stories. So I don't know if a flashback would. Now, if you were to use that flashback as a story, as a secret that is revealed somewhere during the story, then maybe that could be a flashback. Sort of like when Luke Skywalker finds out that Darth Vader is his father. Oh, I hope everybody's seen The New Hope by now.
All right. We have another question because somebody just supported that, said unless the character now realizes what something meant. So that could be the flashback. Do turning points correspond to the end of Act 1, the midpoint, and the end of Act 2?
Typically, yes.
Yes.
Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Yes. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Great. Great. So that's it for right now for turning points.
Thank you so much, Julie. Okay, so our next plotting element are their plots. Bigger the story, typically speaking, and remember, these are all generalizations. Every storyteller is unique. Every story is unique. The bigger the story, the more plots it has. In a short story, you probably only have one plot because it's a pretty short story. In a novella, which is a little bigger than a short story, but smaller than a novel, you may have two plots. Remember, these are rule of thumbs, generalizations. Your mileage may vary. In a single title novel, you typically have a main plot, two subplots, and when your story is a romance, like a romantic suspense, you also have the romance subplot. That is, and the romance subplot has to be integral to the story, no cheating. Think of the main plot as an umbrella. Moving under the umbrella are the subplots, which impact and react to the main plot, either supporting it or obstructing it. All of the subplots are in some way connected back to the main plot. And as the story progresses, the subplots come into sharper focus. Segue. I'm saying first plot and second plot, but these plots have no numbers. So the subplots have no numbers. So please don't think that I'm trying to give one more weight than another. Although sometimes they do have more weight than others. Let's see how Beauty and the Beast handles its plot and subplot. In the main plot of Beauty and the Beast is lifting the curse. Everything that happens in the story, from Maurice's imprisonment, Belle taking Maurice's place, and even Garcon's plans to force Belle to marry him, moves us closer and closer to lifting the curse. The main plot, you may recall the story's logline. An arrogant young prince and his castle's servants fall under the spell of a wicked enchantress who turns him into a hideous beast until he learns to love and is worthy of love in return. So the first subplot is Maurice's efforts to rescue Belle. His goal is to put together a group of townspeople to storm the castle. His motivation is rescuing Belle. His conflict is people don't believe that there is a monster anywhere near the town and that this monster has imprisoned Belle. What Maurice is doing, in effect, by trying to rescue Belle, he's giving Garcon a premise with which Garcon can have Maurice institutionalized unless Belle agrees to marry him. So Maurice's subplot is feeding into Garcon's subplot, which is feeding into the main plot. Second subplot, or another subplot, is often centered on the antagonist's goal, motivation, and conflict. In fact, in Beauty and the Beast, the second subplot centers on Garcon's efforts to marry Belle. He wants to marry Belle because he wants to be envied by everybody in the town. His conflict is Belle is not going to marry him. Snap out of it, dude. It's not ever going to happen. His resolution is to threaten to have Maurice committed to a mental institution unless Belle marries him. His subplot leads directly to the threat against Beast. Now, in the romance subplot, we see how the protagonists help each other achieve their internal goals. It gives the readers scenes in which they can see how the protagonists are falling in love with each other and why they would be compelled to each other. So Belle helps Beast to heal and to be more empathetic. He becomes more human around her. Remember, there's that, if you saw the movie, there's that whole scene where he takes a bath and gets a haircut and puts on nice clothes. And then for Beast's part, he provides Belle with adventure that he gifts her with the library. So those are examples of plots and subplots. Do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions. I will ask one while we're here. Can you have more than 2 subplots?
Oh, yes, you can. But don't go too crazy because you don't want to confuse the readers. You just want to have a full, vibrant, compelling story. So if you have 2 or 3 subplots, that's super cool. But don't go crazy with it because then readers get, there's too much to keep up with. They could lose track.
Great.
Thank you so much, Julie. So now we're going on to another one of my favorites, which is 25 things that have to happen. These are the 25 things you, as a storyteller, identify as having to happen in your specific, unique story. Remember, every storyteller is unique, every story is unique. Now, having said that, there are a handful of big events that readers expect in fiction novels, in genre fiction. So for example, in a romance, they have a right to expect that a couple will meet and fall in love. In a mystery, they have a right to expect that there's going to be an investigation of a crime. And in a time travel, they are right to expect people to travel to a different time, whether it's someplace in the future, someplace in the past, maybe even a different dimension. In addition to these very understandable reader expectation events, there are big events that will be unique to your story. So as an example, let's pretend that we're writing a marriage of convenience romance. One of the big events would be the wedding ceremony. In an international thriller, one of the big events would be traveling to the international destination. Now, these 25 things, this is a fairly extreme level of plotting. It speaks to plotting chapter by chapter and building each chapter scene by scene. Now, you're probably dying to know how I came up with 25. For me, when I started writing, when I started my writing journey, it was just basic math in a desperate attempt to save my sanity. Back in the day, in a single title novel, we estimated that there were 400 pages per completed manuscript. This is back in the day. So for me, this worked out to about 16 pages per chapter, divided by, because I just wanted 16 pages in each chapter, divided by 400 pages, led to 25 chapters, boom, 25 things that have to happen. So I think of this in terms of identifying one really big event per chapter, and then outlining the scenes that lead to that big event, or the scenes that are a result of that big event. Let's take a look at examples of big events that occur per chapter in genre fiction. So if we look at the romance novel examples, these 5 big events are fairly typical of a romance novel. The protagonists meet, they fall in love, they're torn apart, they resolve their issues, they make up and live happily ever after. So these are examples of basic big events in a general romance novel. In mystery novels, a dead body or some other crime is discovered. The investigators, whether they're professional or amateur, identify the means, motive, and opportunity. Suspects are interviewed. The villain is identified. You capture the villain and close the case. Those are examples of some big events that occur in a mystery novel. And so you could take those and develop the scenes that lead to the dead body or crime being discovered, and then what happens as a consequence of the body being discovered. Let's look at the big examples of big events that occurred in Beauty and the Beast. Belle takes Maurice's place in the castle. So he goes back to town. He's dragged back to town because he doesn't want to leave Belle, and she stays in the castle. Despite all odds, Belle and Beast are falling in love. Garçon threatens Maurice. Beast is attacked. The curse is lifted. Those are some examples of big events. Do we have any questions on the 25 things?
So one question is, I've heard that a chapter should equal a scene. I don't understand how you can only have 25 scenes in a whole book. What do you
now
think?
that is a fantastic question. Once again, every story is unique. So for example, Mary Higgins Clark had a tendency to have like 60 chapters in her books because sometimes a chapter was just one scene. So you could do it that way. Or you could put I don't like to go past 16 pages in one chapter because I know that people like to get through chapters kind of quickly. So you could have one 16-page scene, or you can have 2 8-page scenes, or a scene that's 10 pages and another one that's 6 pages. This is just a general rule of thumb to help you get started thinking about it. But you might end up having 50 things that have to happen. Or you might want to take your 4 scenes per chapter and break those into 4 chapters. Do you see what I'm saying? Should I word that another way?
No, I see what you're saying. Here, I'm going to pop on so we're together. When a scene is a container of action, so you can have 2 or 3 scenes in a chapter. And so that's, I think, one of the questions. One scene doesn't equal one chapter. It depends on how you write. As you said, there's some novels that have 100 chapters now because each scene is its own. There's some that have 2 or 3 scenes, but I like the idea that each chapter has that motivation. Somebody would like to see the slides for the 5 things for romance and 5 things for mystery again. So if you can go back there and just let them sit, that would be great. Somebody else said, I'm missing something. I only see 5 things that have to happen, not 25. So I think that what Patricia is saying is the 25 is your plot. That's up to you to find your 25 unique things. So 5 of them for romance novel are here, but then you're going to be adding the other things that's how you can help structure your novel. Am I understanding that correctly, Patricia?
You're absolutely on point. As I mentioned at the beginning, those 25 things are things that you, storyteller, need to identify for your unique story. No one can identify them for you. You're the storyteller. This is your story. These are your things. But to help you understand what I'm talking about, here are these typical general things that you usually see in genre fiction by genre.
Right. Do you use TRD, twist, reversals, and danger in those 25 things?
You absolutely could, yes. You can have a scene where you have that twist. You can have that scene where there's a reversal of fortune. You can have that scene where there's particular danger. Of course, it would be more than one scene that has a twist, more than one that has a reversal, more than one that has the danger. But yes, that would be a wonderful way to plot it.
Right. So what I'm finding interesting about this presentation is whether you're a plotter or a pantser, there's work that you can do using your 7 tips. This isn't how to turn a pantser into a plotter. This is how you can, however you write your novel, you can use these ideas and these tips and these techniques to form your book and to add more depth.
That is a wonderful way of putting it, Julie. Absolutely. The thing is, this helped me get past the blank page. And I don't know about other people here, but the blank page I find very unnerving. It makes you not want to go to the keyboard because there's nothing on the page. But if you could get a start somewhere, something, it helps.
Patricia, can you move forward to the 5 mystery points
Oh, I'm
as
sorry.
we're talking? No, people are having time to write, so that's a good thing. These 5 big things are sometimes also referred to as tentpole events because they hold up the entire plot.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent.
Somebody says, this is very cool. Now I have steps to follow. I've been complicating my story, and then to look at internal conflict to increase drama. Many thanks. So that's a
that's
lovely
so
thing.
kind of you. Thank you so much.
Somebody else asked, what name do you use to write your mysteries?
Olivia Matthews.
Olivia Matthews, who has a book coming out this summer, I believe, correct?
Actually, it's in the fall, September. Don't tell me. No. You're right. It's the summer. September 13th is still the summer. Sorry.
That's all right. And then has a new series coming out next year, but you'll hear more about that. Any other, whoops, we got another question. Can you show the mystery novel slide again? We did that. So plot 1 could be the 5 things, plot 2, another 5. Yes, or these 5 things are interdispersed throughout your, the 25 things are however you want to tell your story. I mean, they're unique to your story.
Right. Don't lean on these 5 things too heavily. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to give you examples to help spark your 25 things. For example, in your mystery, there might not be a dead body. It might be a completely different kind of mystery. So don't lean on these too much. These are just brain ticklers to help you think of your 25 things.
Right. And then the other things will be unique to your story, to your characters, to your subgenre, to whatever you're doing.
Exactly. Because remember, you are a unique storyteller. No one can tell you how to tell your story, at least not while you're drafting it. So don't get hung up on, oh, how am I supposed to do this? What am I supposed to include? Just dive into just think of your story, think of what you're trying to say, and plot it based on what you want to say.
So we have another question, Patricia. I think we're doing okay with time. So can you explain shadow trait again and give an example? I'm going to just speak for me. When you did that, it made me think. And so I think I took notes, and it's something I'm going to think about. I'm going to unpack and really dive into, because it's so helpful to think about those shadow traits and everything else. But can you explain the shadow trait again? And also the, what was the other one that you called it? The fatal flaw, and just how they correspond to primary and secondary motivations.
Certainly. So the shadow trait, and this really struck me because when I was working for a bank, I was working in a corporate communication department. It stunned me how people viewed me because I did not see myself the way that they saw me. They saw me as like a pocket protector kind of a person. I don't know what, like really into the minutia. And that was the primary trait. They saw me as someone being very detailed, as an example. So that's the primary trait. The reason they saw me that way is that they saw how I planned my projects. So my shadow trait of being a planner supported that primary trait of my being really detailed. So that's why they saw me as being this like super nerd. Trust me, I'm not. But anyway, so that's an example of a shadow trait supporting the primary trait. Why do they see me as super nerdy? Because I'm a planner. Okay, now the fatal flaw, let's say, for example, that I wanted to be more spontaneous. I wanted to break out of that super nerd and be more spontaneous. That would be my aspirational secondary trait. The fatal flaw is my organizational, my dependency on organization. That would prevent me from being more spontaneous. Could you tell me if that helped?
Yeah, I think also can shadow traits and fatal flaws be a little bit more psychological? I mean,
Oh,
there's something that people don't acknowledge or understand, or that they're so deep into a character that, you know, it may not be obvious to the reader immediately, but it's what drives that primary and those secondary traits are the psychology of the fatal flaw and the shadow.
absolutely. And actually, that would be much more complex, I think, to get into that psychological motivation, that impetus. So yes, it doesn't have to be physical, it could be psychological.
Do you think researching tropes for a genre might help to determine the 25 things?
Oh, yes, that
Yeah.
would be very helpful. And also researching what editors are looking for could also help you with those 25 things.
Yes, absolutely. Reading some books that an editor or another writer in that genre does, and sort of identifying, seeing if you can identify those 25 things.
Yeah, for
Um,
example,
Go ahead.
oh, thank you. For example, I stumbled across an interview with a Harlequin romantic suspense senior editor, and she listed things that she liked to see in her stories. See if that could fit into your plot.
Excellent. Will this presentation be available on the site to guest members as well? No, sorry, it's going into the member-only archive after today. I have shared the worksheet a couple times, and I will share it again, and I'll follow up. I'll send it out to people again because it's a great worksheet. It lists all these things.
I'm glad that helped.
Would you please show one of the slides with internal and external GMC examples?
Sure. I'm gonna have to go through because I can't see the
No,
numbers
that's
here.
okay. So yes, that helps. Shadow trait supports what people see as a primary trait. Yes. Could a fatal flaw be a wound?
I don't understand what's meant by wound. Do you mean like
Like a trauma of the character?
yes, yes, yes. Well,
Yeah.
that wound could have led to the fatal flaw. Yes. Very,
Right.
very interesting.
Yours is a good example for me. Shadow trait wants to be organized. Fatal flaw flies off the handle. So yeah, that's
I'm glad. I'm glad. This is an internal GMC. And then this
because
is an
remember, internal drives character, external drives action.
I find that helps me to think of
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. It also gives you more to work with when you're thinking about this with your, you know, because you're layering this in with your 25 things, right?
Exactly. It does give you, so if I need my character development to occur, one of the 25 things could be this has to happen so the character could get courage or something like that.
Right. Or change, or, you know, yeah. I mean, they all works together.
Right.
Or should. Patricia, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you do this? Where do you do this in the process? I mean, I'm a plotter, so I could see me doing this, like, and doing the initial plot and then spending some time with this to really make sure I've got more meat on the bones. But if you're a pantser, I still think that this is really helpful. When, you know, what part of the process do you do all of this work, the character diamonds and everything else? First draft, second draft, all the time?
Typically, I do this before I start writing, typically, because stories come to you in different ways. So sometimes the story comes to me and I have the first chapter before I even start this 7 plotting tools. So typically, I walk around my house talking, yes, out loud, I have no shame, to my characters, and I get an idea of where I'm going. And then I sit down, and over the course of a week, I'll do these 7 tools, because some tools I'm able to do a little faster than others. And then once I'm done with these tools and I've got my 25 things, then I pull out my handy dandy index cards, and I do my index card outline, and I lay them out on the dining table. No, my husband cannot eat on the table at that time. So I lay out my index cards, and then I number my index cards, and then I do my outline.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And then I wonder why people call me a nerd.
Well, you're with, like-minded people here. I mean, many people cheered when you pulled out the index cards.
Oh, really?
You mentioned a series. Does Patricia spread these out over the series with mini versions in each book?
It depends on the series that I'm writing. So for example, when I wrote, I had a novella trilogy, I did do that because that novella trilogy, it was rapid succession. But when I did my Sister Lou Mysteries trilogy, I just did it for individual books. And so like with the novella, you have to read that novella in the trilogy in order. But with the Sister Lou Mysteries, you don't have to read them in order.
Right, right. Series are interesting too, right? Because it depends on how much, if you're indie, how many you've planned in the series. If you're traditionally published, how many books you got on the contract, because you don't want to arc something that nobody's going to ever see.
Oh, yes, yes.
But yes, this is great. So I think we're pretty good with the questions. Again, I'm going to put, you're getting lots of love in the chat.
Oh, you guys.
I will send out the PDF again to people who didn't get it, but I did share it a couple of times in the chat. And I want to, on behalf of Sister in Crime and everybody else, Patricia, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, for sharing your enthusiasm, for really explaining this. This has been terrific. For everyone who joined us live, I want to thank you as well. We hope you enjoyed this. And again, if you're not a member of Sisters in Crime, go to sistersincrime.org. You will find the webinar archives under the Learn tab on the website for members. Our next webinar is May 3rd. It's coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern. It's called Killer Suspense with Simon Wood. Then Learning Through Lived Experiences is going to be an Equity Project webinar on May 18th at 7 o'clock Eastern. And then Can I Hook You on My Book, Tips for Writing Effective Query Letters to Agents is going to be on May 24th at 8 o'clock Eastern. So if you're not already a member of Sisters in Crime, click the Join tab where you can learn about the benefits of membership and also learn about our different chapters because we have 60 chapters online. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for being, those of you who are members, thank you for being members. Thank you all for your attention. And I really appreciate it. I hope I see some people at Mouse Domestic this weekend. Patricia, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. You were a diamond gold. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Now I'm going to go and take more notes. Bye, everyone. Happy writing.
Bye.